My name is Mary Norman, and I have been happily married for 4 years now. These years have been filled with love, mutual understanding, and care both between me and my husband, and in relation to our 3-year-old son. Our baby grows up in an atmosphere of love and warmth, surrounded by the attention of both parents. My husband is a man with a kind and sympathetic heart. He has always been especially attentive to our family traditions, especially when it comes to celebrating important dates in our lives. For example, every year on our wedding anniversary and on my birthday, he carefully plans for our son to spend time with my parents. This allows us, the spouses, to spend these special moments together, celebrate them properly, without being distracted by everyday worries. Despite his busy schedule, my husband always finds the time and opportunity to make these days special for both of us. He pays me a lot of attention and care, constantly reminding me how valuable I am to him as a wife and life partner. My half is a talented freelance writer. He collaborates with various publishers, and his works are always distinguished by originality and depth of thought. However, sometimes it seems to me that there is something in his professional life that I do not know about. Maybe it's just my imagination, but sometimes it seems to me that there's more to his work than just writing lyrics. In our family budget, we adhere to the principle of equality and fairness. We are both employed and invest in a common pot, trying to evenly distribute household expenses. This allows us both to feel equally responsible for the financial well-being of our family. Sometimes I think about offering my husband a certain amount of money in the form of a personal allowance from his own earnings to ease his financial burden a little. However, due to the peculiarities of his work related to irregular income and frequent changes in his work schedule, it is difficult for him to plan his expenses with a fixed budget. This adds some difficulties to our family financial planning, but we try to cope with these challenges together, supporting each other and looking for compromises in everything. My birthday was coming up, and I was full of confidence that my husband had prepared some special surprise for me. In my heart, I was looking forward to it when I returned home. Usually, when I crossed the threshold of the house, I was greeted by the joyful hugs of our little daughter, who always greeted me with excited greetings. However, she wasn't there that time. She was probably staying with my parents, waiting for the surprise that my husband had prepared for my birthday. Remembering this now, I realize how naive I was in my expectations and trust. But at that time, I unconditionally believed and loved my husband, not suspecting the slightest shadow of betrayal or deception on the part of the man whom I considered the closest and dearest. As soon as I crossed the threshold of the house, the air was filled with expectation of the unusual. "Hello, I'm home," I announced, taking off my shoes in the hallway. At that moment, my attention was attracted by a pair of women's high-heeled shoes that were lying next to our shoe shelf. These shoes were clearly not my style and size, and I would never have chosen something like this for myself. Could it be the guest's shoes? I thought, wondering who could have come. With these thoughts, I continued my way into the living room and saw my husband in the company of a young and extremely attractive woman. Her appearance was elegant and she exuded confidence. "Welcome home," my husband greeted me with a smile, lightly touching his companion's shoulder. His ease and calmness added to my anxiety. "Today is your birthday, right? But who is this lady?" I asked, feeling the excitement building in me. "This is my mistress," he replied calmly, and at that moment I noticed in his hands the documents that I understood were the divorce papers. I decided to be with her. "This birthday is the most unexpected surprise of your life," he continued. I was amazed and stunned by this revelation. "Why? Who is she?" I asked, trying to make sense of what was happening. My inner world was turning upside down from shock. "My mistress," he admitted without hesitation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My head was spinning with thoughts and questions. He introduced her as a freelance writer, just like me. I was amazed that a husband could present his mistress to me so calmly and with a smile. "Why do you imagine your lover with a smile?" I thought, feeling a mixture of anger, disappointment, and utter bewilderment. How could a man I trusted all my life behave in such a way and so unexpectedly change the whole course of our life together? She was smiling as she stood next to him. I studied her carefully, trying to remember where I'd seen her. She introduced herself as Andrew Kirby, but I've never heard of such a famous writer. My husband said that, as an editor, I should have known about it. "Excuse me, are you Andrew Kirby?" "What is it?" she asked in a husky voice. I started to remember where I had seen her. "Yes, I met her at the publishing house." "I'm sorry, but I love Andrew, so let's get a divorce," my husband continued. He said they met online about 6 months ago. I couldn't believe that I hadn't noticed my husband's infidelity for so long. He talked about her beauty, her youth, and her love for me. At that moment, I realized that I had seen her before. Where is it? These thoughts led me to memories of our meetings at the publishing house. So I decided to ignore her, but I was sure that our paths had crossed before. Involuntarily, a smile played on my face. "What amused you?" he asked. "Nothing, I just had a funny idea," I replied, trying to hide my real mood. "You're acting weird, like you're holding some kind of grudge against Andrew. Is that jealousy?" He was full of ridicule. "It doesn't matter. You do realize that Andrew is a cut above you in every way," he continued, and it seemed to me that he did not even realize how soon he would regret his words. "So let's get divorced," he sounded almost pleading. I continued to watch the scene in front of me, trying to collect my thoughts. "Well, if that's what you want, let's get divorced. My love for you has already faded." My words sounded calm, although emotions were raging inside. "Are you serious?" His eyes shone with joy. "If you're so eager for a divorce, please, I won't hold back someone who says he doesn't love me," I said sincerely. "Do you really mean that?" He was looking forward to it. "Yes, it suits me." "This woman is your choice." I picked up a pen and started signing the divorce papers. "I'd rather see you happy." Of course, that was a lie after all he had done. He deserved a real hell, I thought. Despite the divorce, I intended to claim alimony because he was the one who broke our bond. "Of course I'll pay whatever it takes to be with Andrew," he seemed happy. "And I'll take the kids, so I'll keep the house," I was adamant. "So you're leaving your family for Andrew?" He was a complete idiot. After signing the documents, I handed them over to Ken, now my ex-husband. "Be as happy as possible, even in hell," I whispered to myself as they left. A month later, Ken contacted me. He desperately wanted to meet. Curiously, I agreed. Ken looked exhausted at the meeting. "I didn't think you'd give up so quickly," I thought, accepting coffee from the waiter. "Everything went wrong," he began, and suddenly revealed that he was married. "Congratulations, it's wonderful." "But what's wrong?" I asked. As Ken sat in front of me, looking flustered and confused, he suddenly revealed amazing news to me. "It's about Andrew." Andrew turned out to be a man. He pronounced these words with such surprise, as if it was a real discovery for him. I sat in front of him, listening calmly, and just took a sip of coffee. It was not surprising to me to hear this, because I had already suspected something like this. "Are you surprised?" "How did you know?" His question sounded demanding. Ken looked at me, waiting for an explanation. I put the cup on the table and started telling him what I knew. "He worked for the cleaning company that serviced our publishing house," I began. "I've seen him a few times. He was among those who came to clean our offices. But I never thought they were the same person," I continued, remembering the few times I had seen Andrew in our office. "When he was at work, he didn't wear makeup and a man's hairstyle. I just thought he was one of those men who wears his hair long," I explained to Ken. "He was always neatly dressed, but nothing in his appearance betrayed his true identity. He never made any attempts to hide his masculine nature under a feminine image during working hours. This led me to think that he just prefers long hair, which is not uncommon among men." Ken listened to me, his face expressing a mixture of surprise and bewilderment. "I always thought he was just a cute guy with an unusual hairstyle, but I never suspected that he was hiding his true identity," I continued. But now that I know the truth, I can understand why he chose this path. It was his way of preserving his identity and at the same time adapting to public expectations. But why aren't you surprised by this discovery? Ken asked, still trying to make sense of the situation. Because nowadays many people face similar identity problems. I respect every person's choice, no matter what it is, I replied. For me, human qualities are more important than an external image or social stereotypes. Ken nodded, as if trying to accept this information. He looked away, thinking about how this new knowledge might affect his views and feelings about Andrew. In his eyes, I saw a reflection of the struggle with internal contradictions that he may have experienced throughout their relationship. It was a moment of revelation for Ken, a moment when he was faced with a reality that he had previously not wanted to see. It took me a while to realize that he was the same person we met to discuss our divorce. I had no idea that you liked such things, I said, looking at Ken in surprise. There was a thought inside me that Ken couldn't like men. We have spent so many years together, and there has never been any suspicion in this direction. I probably never thought about it seriously. Apparently, the best thing I could do was to give him the freedom to be happy in his own way. You could have told me. Didn't you think it was strange that someone who wasn't an actress could be so beautiful? I asked. Even if someone was born beautiful, you need to have a great desire to be a woman to achieve such beauty. And this femininity is not always inherent in women by nature. Well, maybe you're right, but you knew that I like women, he replied. Yes, but you're lucky, she turned out to be exactly who you dreamed of, I remarked. No, it's not like that. You were so infatuated that even if I told you that Andrew was a man, you wouldn't understand it and would probably accuse me of jealousy, he explained. Maybe you're right. But even if I didn't tell you anything, you would still accuse me of jealousy if I mentioned this man, I continued. Yes, it's true, Ken admitted, still not realizing my true feelings. I knew that eventually he would realize that Andrew was a man, and that would cause him to panic. I was sure of it, and that's how it happened. Why didn't you realize this before? You should have noticed when you were dating, I said. Ken remembered once commenting on Andrew's deep voice, and he, Andrew, burst into tears, saying that he hated his voice because of the thick vocal cords. Fake tears, I thought. But did you know when you were alone with him, or has he already had surgery? No, she said she doesn't want to do it until we get married. I thought she was very humble, Ken said. It's a great excuse, and you believed it. But didn't you realize that before applying for marriage, the marriage certificate doesn't specify gender? Just husband and wife. I was surprised. Oh, really? Ken caught on. And they accepted it. Yes, many places now accept same-sex marriage. You're lucky that your marriage was recognized. I wish I could, Ken said. But you are so eager to get married. I finished, thinking about how difficult it can be to understand other people's desires and motives. I didn't want to marry a man, but that wasn't the most important thing. You said you loved him very much. Is gender so important? I asked. It's not just that. You know, the feeling of hugging is different. There are muscular women and chubby men, it all depends on perception. But you're already married, so it's too late to change anything now, I continued. I'm thinking about a divorce, he said dryly. Oh, how cruel, I was surprised. In the end, it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, as long as your hearts are connected. You're physically close, aren't you? Then there is no problem. You're still the man in this pair, so nothing has changed, I explained. But that's not it. He's doing well, it's like a bonus, he said, reflecting on the situation. I imagined this scenario. He was one of those men who brings his beloved home and then asks for a divorce. I knew he would react this way as soon as he found out that Andrew was a man. But asking for a divorce immediately after marriage is the highest degree of disrespect for the person he married on a whim, I thought. You're married, now you just have to accept it, I said. Getting divorced right after getting married is the worst thing you can do. Maybe you can overcome the fact that she's a man, I suggested, trying to calm him down. But to be honest, I didn't care if they broke up or stayed together. After all, Ken's fall into hell was just beginning. Just enjoy everything, there's no point in breaking up now. It's going to get even more interesting, I thought. Don't rush into marriage, it's a long-term thing, I advised him when we broke up. However, the next news came faster than I expected. 2 months later, Ken contacted me again, this time with concern in his voice. "Listen, Andrew is in debt," he said. "Oh, and why should I be surprised?" I asked. "It's even more amazing," he continued. "What kind of debt?" I asked. He explained that these were medical bills and medical expenses for his parents. Well, that sounds like a decent thing to do. But I wonder if this is really for his parents, I thought, wondering about the real reason for Andrew's debts. Ken, noticing my smile, became wary. "Do you know something? Why are you smiling in such a strange situation? You wouldn't look like this if you didn't know anything." I tried to stay neutral. I can't interfere in your couple's personal affairs. I'm just an outsider. But, really, something is wrong here. Ken, you're perceptive. If you're so worried about this issue, why don't you call Andrew and figure it out on your own? "Maybe I'll call," Ken said, looking doubtful that Andrew would tell him the truth over the phone. When Ken did ask Andrew about the debts, he nonchalantly replied that they were indeed his parents' medical expenses. "Remember, I told you about this before. Have you forgotten?" Andrew added. I was pretty sure that these medical expenses were not for Andrew's parents, but for something else. "What a caring wife you have, Ken," I teased, although Ken seemed intrigued by something else and did not delve into this question. However, the situation soon escalated, and 3 months later Ken came to my house with Andrew, saying that they were divorced. "Please don't come here anymore if we haven't contacted you," I said, feeling a little uneasy. "You must be bored, right?" Ken asked. "I'm not bored, I'm an editor, and I have an important job." "For example, take a break," I replied, trying to remain polite. Ken, standing on my doorstep, seemed confused and insistent at the same time. "Just listen to me," he said over and over again. Reluctantly, I let them in. There was tension in my house, and I could feel unresolved issues hanging in the air. As soon as they crossed the threshold, Ken immediately started a conversation. "You said Andrew is a freelance writer. But is this really the case? Do you know him?" His voice sounded doubtful and demanding at the same time. When Ken came into my house, his face was full of anxiety and bewilderment. "Of course, I know your lover and current spouse, if that's what you're interested in," I replied, imbuing my words with subtle irony. My tone was light and playful, but I felt that Ken took my words very differently. His gaze was concerned, and he was clearly looking for answers to deeper questions. However, Ken didn't smile back at my joke. "No, I mean, is he really a writer?" he insisted. I sighed, realizing that Ken wasn't looking for easy answers or comfort in my words. He longed to find out the truth about Andrew's profession, something that could perhaps explain his own worries and doubts. As I said before, he's a janitor. "I don't understand what a cleaner is," my words were frank and without evasion. I could feel the tension in the air building as I discovered Andrew's true profession. His reaction was instantaneous, his face transformed from shock to deep concern. It was clear that he was hiding his real job by working under the guise of a man, which was undoubtedly part of a more complex personal scenario. Andrew has always dreamed of becoming a writer. His dreams were connected with creativity and the opportunity to work from home, creating works that could inspire and captivate others. However, the reality of his life was completely different. There were obstacles and difficulties on his way, which forced him to choose a more practical and stable way to earn a living. "I'm not going to interfere in your personal life, but the fact remains that I was deceived," Ken said. His voice was full of fatigue and disappointment. He, like me, was deceived by illusions and ideas about a person whom both considered close. Now Ken was faced with a reality that was not at all what he expected. This reality hit him with the weight of unfulfilled expectations and shattered dreams. Ken, you said you loved him. Can't this love survive the disappointment of professional achievements? I tried to comfort him. My words were intended to remind Ken of the depth of his feelings for Andrew, that their bond was stronger than just admiration for each other's careers. But it was obvious that Ken was having a hard time accepting this unexpected truth. He felt cheated not only by Andrew, but also by life itself, which presented him with such an unexpected and difficult turn of fate. Ken stood in front of me like a man who had lost all hope. His eyes were full of disappointment, and it seemed that he was looking for some consolation in my words. Ken, you said you loved him. Why don't you just forgive him? After all, you have already achieved so little in this situation. My words sounded encouraging, but I felt that they had not reached his heart. My attempt to reduce the tension in the room was unsuccessful, as Ken was too immersed in his problems and frustrations to accept my support. The situation with Andrew was much more complicated than I had imagined. It turned out that the debts Ken was talking about were not related to his parents' medical expenses, as he claimed. With the help of my contacts and resources, I found out that the money was spent by Andrew on his own breast augmentation surgery. Here's the thing, I said, realizing that this turn of events was adding additional complexity to the already complicated history of their relationship. Ken stubbornly insisted that Andrew was a writer. However, according to my data, this was not quite the case. I found that Andrew wrote about his daily life on social media, but these texts did not bring him income. They were more a form of self-expression than a professional activity. He can be a successful writer if he writes for us. We will pay him properly, I suggested, seeing the potential in his ability to express his thoughts and feelings through words. I saw that Andrew has the talent and ability to write, which could bring him success in the future. My offer to write for our publishing house was not only an attempt to help Andrew find his way in life, but also a chance for him to start all over again. I hoped that writing could become not only a source of income for him, but also a means of self-realization. Ken, however, was stunned and disappointed. He couldn't believe that the person he loved and trusted actually led a completely different lifestyle. His love and trust have been called into question, and now he is faced with the need to rethink his attitude towards Andrew and himself. Meanwhile, Andrew seemed stunned by the whole situation. He understood that his secret had been revealed, and now he would have to face the consequences of his decisions. He could take advantage of my offer and start a new life as a writer, but it would also require him to accept his past and take responsibility for his actions. At that moment, I realized that each of us faces our own problems and difficulties. Ken and Andrew, although involved in a difficult relationship, now had the chance to start a new chapter in their lives. I hope that they could find a way to reconciliation and understanding, and that Andrew would be able to make his dream of writing a reality. But Ken continued to ignore Andrew's feelings. Andrew, you're just the worst. Why am I the worst? Ken argued. It turned out that Ken was also not as successful a writer as he claimed. His column was closed due to low popularity. Ken, you were being arrogant yourself, thinking Andrew was a successful writer, I said. But now that I think about it, Ken, maybe you should support Andrew. When Ken heard about my $60,000 alimony claim, he was shocked. You said you'd pay, right? Why are you saying this now? It doesn't matter when I say this, we are still not divorced, and I want this to be settled once. I can't rely on your income to get my payments, I insisted. Ken flared up. It's impossible. How can I pay such an amount right away? I was adamant, nothing is impossible. You can just borrow them. After the divorce, Andrew found the strength to rethink his life and turn to writing. He made his debut at the publishing house where I worked, and his first article about the life of same-sex couples caused a wide response. It was written with such sincerity and understanding that it immediately received rave reviews from readers. The article talked about the importance of recognizing and respecting all forms of love. It made you think and opened your eyes to many aspects of same-sex relationships. Soon after, Andrew began writing a regular column in our magazine. He has written on a variety of topics related to LGBT rights, love, relationships, and self-determination. Each of his articles was thoughtful, deep, and insightful. Andrew found his voice as a writer, and his talent quickly became noticed and appreciated by readers. That's how Andrew got on his way to success. He turned his personal experiences and trials into a source of inspiration for his work. He showed that even after painful breakups and life shocks, you can find the strength to recover and take a step forward. Ken, after the divorce, remained lonely and immersed in his own thoughts. He realized that he had lost not only his spouse, but also a part of himself. In those moments when he saw Andrew's progress, Ken may have wondered what might have happened if he had acted differently. He couldn't help but feel regret for the lost opportunities and how his relationship with Andrew might have turned out if he had shown more understanding and tolerance. I found a new role for myself in Andrew's life, becoming not only his friend, but also a kind of mentor in his writing career. Convinced of his talent and potential, I actively tried to convince him to continue writing for our publishing house. I saw in his texts a spark of sincerity and uniqueness that our readers appreciated. At the same time, Ken, Andrew's ex-husband, was going through difficult times. His attempts to find his place in the world of literature were unsuccessful. He sent his articles to various publications, but, unfortunately, did not receive a response. This lack of recognition, combined with accumulated child support and maintenance debts, led him into a state of financial despair. Ken was forced to earn a living by odd jobs and seemed to be looking for a woman who could financially support him. After my relationship with Ken ended in a stormy and painful breakup, I went through a period of deep mental pain and rethinking. It was a difficult time, filled with tears, reflections, and attempts to understand how it could happen that our common life led to such a sad ending. But over time, accepting and experiencing every pain and disappointment, I gradually found the strength to move on. I found peace of mind and peace. It wasn't something that came to me suddenly. It was a slow process in which every day I learned to appreciate myself and my life without Ken. I learned to find joy in the little things, to find meaning in everyday life, and to find satisfaction in what I already have. I began to devote more time to myself, my interests and hobbies, allowing myself to relax and do things that really brought me joy. The biggest source of my happiness was my child. I tried to live a calm and orderly life with him, creating comfort and warmth in our house. Every day I tried to fill it with happiness and positivity, bringing small joys and pleasant moments into our daily lives. We often walked in the park, played educational games, read books, and spent time together enjoying simple things. In these moments spent with my child, I found true happiness and satisfaction. They helped me understand that happiness is not always connected with other people or external circumstances, but sometimes it is right in front of us, in our own home, in communication with loved ones, and in the daily details of life. As time went on, I became more and more convinced that breaking up with Ken, although difficult and painful, eventually led me to a much calmer and happier life. I have become a stronger, more confident woman who knows her worth and strives for harmony and happiness in her life. This period became for me a time of rebirth and a new beginning, a time when I was able to rediscover the joy of life. Andrew and I eventually became good friends. Despite the fact that our acquaintance began with a painful situation related to Ken, we both found solace in our meetings. We often met over a cup of tea or dinner, discussing various topics and sharing our experiences. We shared a common experience, and we learned to appreciate each other's company and support. Andrew's book, which he has been working hard on, will be published soon. I plan to give a copy of this book to Ken. It will not only be a gesture of goodwill, but also a reminder that life is unpredictable and full of twists. Often those whom we consider lost find their way and achieve success. This gift will symbolize my hopes that Ken will also be able to find his way to healing